Sorry for the delay. Thank you for your patience. He has forgotten more about politics than most of us will ever know. He comes in on Fridays and we talk about some of what is happening and has happened in the week prior. He's the great Michael Shore, everyone. Hi, Michael.
Hi. I think I forgot more about it
Why
during.
is he muted? Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
You feel that you had to wait a little too long there, Michael? Is that
Yeah, I think I forgot more about politics in the throughout the
in the wait
extended version,
you think? Yeah, right.
the Panhandle version of Florida, fabulous Florida.
Well, Michael, it's a part of America. It's a slice of
Yeah.
that part.
I was supposed to be there today, actually, so that's why I'm able to join us. I was supposed to be at at Donald Trump's birthday party and Flag Day celebration in Palm Beach. But
Well, it is a very big day, it being Donald Trump's birthday and Flag Day, which is the favorite holiday of the Alitos. And I wonder if you might give us some reflections on what's happening. The Supreme Court with 2 points. First of all, Clarence Thomas this week remembering that, oh, yeah, I did take those private trips with funded by Harlan Crow, the billionaire donor. And I meant to tell you, initially, by the way, the statement was, no, he didn't take those trips. That's an erroneous story. Now it's like, oh, it's an accurate story. But the other big news out of the Supreme Court is on bump stocks, of course. Maybe you can start where you want, but that's the latest out of the court.
Well, I think the bump stocks thing is interesting because it's the court being the court in a way. It was divided along ideological lines, but it's saying this is not a Second Amendment issue. This is an issue over whether or not you can just by fiat say these things and change the rules as it goes without any kind of congressional action. Again, and I say this all the time, I'm not an economist and I'm not a lawyer, but it does strike me that this is more about precedent and more about what the court is allowed, what the president and executive action is allowed to do on a case like this, because it is something that would fall under the umbrella of what Congress and the legislative bodies allowed to do. Of course, it does seem to, because it went along ideological lines, in these cases, you would expect if I was right, that it would be unanimous. It would be the 3 liberal justices saying, yeah, we hate these bump stocks, but you can't just go and do this. But it wasn't. And whenever it falls down that 6-3 divide that we know so well in the court now, it makes you think that, there's something else afoot here. And I don't think it doesn't feel Second Amendment-y, but because of the divide, I look at it a little differently.
That's really an interesting take because I, of course, just went, oh, it's Second Amendment-y, but you've actually said, no, I think it's actually the law taking precedent, although your opinions informed slightly by the divide that you've noted. Interesting.
Exactly. And then as the Thomas stuff, this really piles up on the desk of John Roberts, the Chief Justice at this point. There has to be some kind of code of ethics that if it doesn't exist, that has existed implicitly for all these years of the Supreme Court, it needs now to be written because of what certainly Justice Thomas has done, to a lesser degree what Alito has done or his Mrs. Alito has done, but there has to be always an image of impartiality. We're all humans, we all have opinions, and his are written down, so we know what his opinions are throughout. But I do think that there has to be some kind of code because there is nothing to police this kind of behavior. And if you have justices who refuse to recuse themselves from cases that intersect these issues, then I think it's a problem.
Well, intersect these issues. You've got justices who essentially have in their own homes people and strategies.
Yeah, there's no question. Or you get, who's the guy, Mark Burnett? You get him to come and do the Real Housewives of the Supreme Court, and then you're having a conversation.
She, Mrs. Alito, is a wild card. She, she makes him look like Merrick Garland. She makes him look tame. She really, Anyway, that's the court, and that's the court as we've now seen increasingly the obviousness of how compromised it is, not so much just in their opinions, but in this reporting, this independent reporting. So the comments of Alito's wife, the comments of Alito that have now been revealed, Michael, they do expose the court in new ways, but they don't really matter, I guess.
They don't. They just expose. I mean, like, are you talking about that the secret
the tape,
stuff?
the recording.
Yeah, I mean, look, I found the Mrs. Alito stuff the most compelling of that. I think also the sort of the straight ahead. I found Justice Roberts to be impressive in the way he handled those questions and didn't take the bait. What Alito said, I don't know if there's anything wrong with what he said, in terms of he is somebody who looks at the divide and said somebody's going to win, right? I mean, yeah, somebody's going to win. It's not his job to determine that or to compromise. But so I wasn't miffed by a lot of what he said. I think that that what his wife said was more telling about what the Alitos think as a unit, and he as a justice was more careful than she was. It was enlightening because to me because you never hear them speak than it was. Then I thought it was as gotcha as a lot of people say. But
it's funny you say this because I had the same thought about him. That he kind of played it, I thought, in the moment in the most politic way that you could. I mean, given his clear disposition and the crowd he was speaking with, and this person was coming from that crowd.
That's important, Mark, what you say, because everybody should hear what you just said, which is that given his clear disposition, so we know what's happening behind those eyes, right? And so we're looking for more than what I thought. But anyway, continues.
Yeah, no, and I was just saying that she had this kind of aggro junkyard dog quality to the, I wish I could, I'm going to sell my own flag. She broke out the blowtorch at the first conversational chance she had.
Yeah, exactly. And that was interesting to me. And you could see a lot of the way he is as a jurist in the words that she said as the wife of a jurist, which I thought was interesting.
Now to the GOP.
Yeah.
And the meeting with Donald Trump. He went to Capitol Hill, all the ironies, the eeriness, the bizarre nature of the meeting from the standpoint of just the location, this place that has now become infamous as Donald Trump's efforts on January 6th to foment and otherwise create momentum sufficient enough to perhaps stay in office, sit in our history. I wonder if you can speak to the meeting as we've learned. It was this kind of freewheeling meeting, really had little to do with policy from everything I've read, and more to do with fealty, loyalty. And
I mean, that's what this was about. This was about, all right, I'm the nominee, and it's time for you to embrace me. And it's the first time I've been here since January 6th. I didn't show up for the inauguration of President Biden. And now it's a rare appearance for me here, but you have to make an appearance with me so that we can show an appearance of unity. Even though there are some people there who have been critical of the former president, you have the Republicans standing in line, especially the senators, and many of whom want to be, or at least a handful of whom want to be his running mate when it comes time to select that in the next little while. But the senators that were there were obvious. It was Lindsey Graham and Ted Cruz and Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee, all the people that love him. But then there's Tim Scott, then there's J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, all these people who want to be part of it. I should say, I don't know if I saw Rubio there, but I believe he was there. And so that's what you're showing unity around this guy, many of whom they have criticized. And the last time, that he had anything to do with the Capitol, it could be argued that he endangered their lives, and it's been argued that he endangered their lives.
The sweepstakes associated with his vice presidential pick, I'm hearing more Rubio. And it's funny, I know we ask you this question occasionally and
Yeah.
along the way. As I recall, one of the things you say is it's not super important. People don't vote for vice president, but yet it is. Maybe it's important in the news cycle. Maybe you can recharacterize it for us, first of all. And then
Yeah.
secondly, speak to Marco Rubio, who's now being talked about, I think, in much more serious ways than he might have been a few months ago.
Well, I think we also have to talk about the technicality when we talk about Rubio, which is that Rubio, you're not allowed to be in the same from the same state as your running mate, and the two of them are Floridians now. Before the conviction of Donald Trump, it was said that, well, he can just change his state, his citizenship to New York from Florida, which is doable, but it becomes a little bit more complicated now that he is a felon in New York and the rules and that he might have to abide by there. So Rubio, to me, is not going to be in the top tier because of that technicality. But again, there may be ways to get around that. Rubio himself could move to Virginia as well. So it doesn't have to be that Rubio is from Florida. He could resign his Senate seat to run for vice presidency. I think what Rubio does is, and what a lot of people are looking for, is youth and future. Rubio ran for president. He ran a lackluster campaign for president, but you want to have a legacy at certain times. You either want a vice president who says, I have no political ambition, or you want one who's young enough to have that ambition. So Dick Cheney, for example, no ambition beyond the vice presidency was when he was with George W. Bush. We thought that about Joe Biden, as a matter of fact, that Joe Biden would have been a vice president and nothing more. So that did change. With Rubio, you know that there's ambition because it's been displayed before. His politics are conservative, but are looked at by moderate, what we now call moderate Republicans, as in line with the way they think. He's not completely MAGA or associated with MAGA, even though he has kowtowed to Donald Trump for so long now. So that perception of divide is important because the Republican Party knows that they can't just be MAGA without Donald Trump after 2028 and maybe after 2024.
So, as you say, there's a workaround on Rubio. In the end, it was noted in one of the comments there that because of the age of both candidates, the vice presidential pick, and you've made this point several times as well, the vice presidential pick is important. In the end, do you see an advantage for Trump with one of these picks?
I personally think, and I agree. I agree that it's going to matter more now than it ever has. I'm a curmudgeon about how important it is, but I will concede that it's more important now with these, practically octogenarians, and the president is 80. I think that the politics as they are, I don't think geography ever matters. I think youth does matter, but I also think that Trump would do well to look at a woman for this role, to neutralize anything that Kamala Harris can bring as a woman, but also because Roe v. Wade is on the ballot and pushing women up, uplifting women in any way that Donald Trump can, because it's such a mark against him across the board in so many ways, both from his civil trial ruling and from what he did as a felon now. I think that would matter. So if I were advising him, I would say the perception of having a woman there, I would be, someone. We talked about Kristi Noem for a long time. Well, I think she disqualified herself with her dog shooting episode. But there are other women out there in the Republican Party who I think would serve the ticket better than some of these men. I don't think Donald Trump listens to conventional wisdom, and it's gotten him pretty far. So we'll see.
As mentioned in the chat, Nikki Haley, certainly she's the highest profile, perhaps.
Yeah, and he would have to do a real dance to get Nikki Haley involved. I don't see.
Well, what do you mean by that?
meaning that they ran against each other. And Nikki Haley, like Marco Rubio, has a future, and she would have to really consider whether a closer association with Donald Trump would help or hurt her in 2028. And I would
I mean,
say
Mike Pence ran against him in the primaried him here.
Mike
I
Pence
mean,
was he was a former vice president, and there's a narrative about Mike Pence within the Republican Party now that has him as a traitor as well. So it's a very it's a different kind of complication. Mike Pence also is not a 2028 hopeful. And if he thinks he is, then he's wrong. Nikki Haley has real viability in 2028. And so the calculation she needs to make is, am I helped or hurt by being on this ticket? And these people will find a way to get on that ticket if they think it'll help them. I don't think being associated with Donald Trump in 2028, even as a sitting vice president, is a big boost in Republican circles at that point, because a lot of people are going to run away from MAGA a little bit. And she would be the clear candidate and the clear choice of people to do that. So
you think there will be an election in 2028?
Yeah, I hope so. Well, what are we going to talk about if not? I can't talk about, San Alito.
There'll be an election the way the Russians have an election. The policy ideas that are being launched by Trump, he's kind of spinning. He talks about the tariffs on, he'd make 100%, put 100% tariffs on Chinese goods. He really smack talks a lot when it comes to economics and the sort of isolationist policies, all of which it would seem, based on what I've seen, and I'm sure he hasn't thought it through at all, but would be wildly inflationary. And he also smack talks NATO. And these are the things that we had heard him say before, but he seems poised, and based on the 2025 strategies as laid out, he seems poised to follow through on some of this. I mean, obviously, the 2025 thing is really associated with dismantling a lot of government. But it sounds as though he would almost erase the State Department, for examut. These policy positions, Michael, are we going to hear more about them in the months ahead because now the trial is over? Or do they not matter? Put that in some context for me.
I would suspect he'll try and work some of them into a debate with Biden that's going to happen later this month. So I think that to that end, yes. But look, Donald Trump figured out a way to win the presidency in 2016, and I always defer to people who are able to do that. He knows a bit more than I do, or his people do, about certain things. But my guess is that this is not the best way. He is not running to get those people who love him to vote for him like he did in 2016, to get the people who hadn't voted in 2012. He's trying to get moderate Republicans and independent voters and independent women to vote for him. Increasing inflation is not a way to speak to those people, because a lot of those voters are far more thoughtful than the voters who are already in line with him, more thoughtful about issues like that. So he can be a mile wide and an inch deep with a lot of the people whose support is cemented behind him in MAGA world. But when you're trying to win new voters and you're doing it with flawed policy, or policy that you can't explain, or policy that is anathema to the way people are thinking now. I mean, if his economic policy would cause further inflation at a time when people are struggling to buy a loaf of bread in many ways, in many places, when a tank of gas costs X amount of dollars, you don't want to put inflation out front. He could say that to his supporters, his loyal supporters. They won't blink an eye. They're not there for the policy. The people who are remain undecided or who are able to be wooed are people that are looking at policy.
Yeah, and this is such an important point you're making, because these policies will have to be articulated in a way somehow to bring some of those people over. The people who you've met with along the way as you've covered these various rallies, they don't care. They're there for the show. They're there because something about that guy, a charisma, gut feeling, something hits them right. Yeah. So it's so interesting that it will come down to policy on some level during this debate. You know, it's interesting as he, last minute or so, Michael, as he freewheels the way he did the other day with the shark and the boat going down and the electrocution, and he just kind of goes. It reminds me of all of those who came out of the Trump administration, some of whom, are scary people, like John Bolton, for example, very hawkish guy and scary in many ways. But they say almost to a person that Donald Trump doesn't know what he's talking about. He has no interest in public policy. He has no interest in almost anything except himself. He doesn't read briefing materials. He is completely ignorant. He is a danger, is what a lot of them say. Oddly, or perhaps you can explain to me, perhaps it's not so odd, but that message has just been lost in the noise. I don't hear a lot about it.
Again, but right. I think it goes off of what we were just talking about, Mark, which is that the people that create his base couldn't care less. They're the same people that don't read past the headline and I don't mean to generalize them, but I think that we have spoken to enough of them to know that A, they're not ashamed of this, and B, that it's true in large part. And so the people that the John Boltons are talking to, or the people that will hang on to what John Bolton is saying, are the people that are really loath to vote for Donald Trump again. And those are the people that Trump has to win over in some ways, which is why policy, like we just said, is somewhat important because of the land that has not yet been claimed.
So do you think, Michael, that those messages, not to interrupt, but just that those messages or those summaries of what was said, of how it was said, or these people, these personalities, will bubble back up to the surface in the next few months?
I think it probably has already landed with people who wouldn't go back to Trump. I don't think it's a huge number of people that'll be affected by it. But in terms of becoming something that we talk about during the election and during the campaign in the fall, I think it will somehow find its way to the fore again. The people that talking about being disinterested in policy and not being up to the task. I mean, you can fool people for a long time. You can make people think that you're a great golfer by talking about all the golf you're playing, but you never play with them, right? But when you have to play with them, you have to show up and be able to golf. And I don't think I think that the audience is thinning for Trump.
Such good stuff today. Thank you, my friend. Did we leave anything, Michael? Did I leave anything on the table? I know we can't get to everything, but was there something else I should have touched on? I feel.
I think maybe Edmonton being down 3-0, 3 games in, and
Commish, what is the story on this Stanley Cup playoff? Do you have any thoughts with Michael Shore? I mean, my God, it's how does that
Albert? Thank you.
How does that happen?
Well, one team's clearly been in the NBA final or NHL finals, so I think that's showing.
Albert, I think you'd agree that Florida is just a superior team right now to everybody else, and they're getting great goaltending, and they've figured out how to neutralize the best player in the world and his winger. So it's tough going.
Well, if it's any consolation, the NBA playoffs are equally as disappointing. It's a 3-0 run, and
or they had 3-0 as well.
And I don't even think the games are interesting. I really don't. I find the NBA to be a disappointment.
Yeah, well, I found it that way, but only for decades. So.
Well, it's.
Can you let him finish?
Yeah,
sir?
Let me finish. It's just like hockey.
Is what I was gonna say.
He's forgotten more about politics than most people will ever know. He's so generous to be here on Fridays. Next Friday, you're off, though, right?
No, I'm here next Friday. It's in 2 weeks.
Next Friday. Okay. Michael Shore, everybody. Thanks, Michael. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.